Awesome. Yes, we are now live.
Woohoo! Well
Bit of a hiccup
done.
there. Okay, I'm just going to check that it's in there because I'm flying solo today without Juliet. There we go.
We
It's
did
there.
it.
We did it with a little bit of
We
help,
did it,
but
and
we
I
did it.
just sat quietly.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, welcome to She's of Love, everyone. And today we have the beautiful Fiona Morrison on with us, well, with me. And we're talking everything motherhood. Because we've been speaking a bit and we've realized that we have quite a bit in common in our experiences with motherhood, with pregnancy and losing babies and things like that. So we thought we would come on and share our similarities and our differences live so that everyone else could listen in and benefit. So if you guys have anything that you want to add or contribute in the do it in the comments, and throughout the conversation I'll check in and you guys can participate with us, which
That
would
would
be
be
nice.
so awesome, wouldn't it, if we did
Yeah,
some
exactly.
questions or
So let's get started. um I would love to hear about your experience. Did you always want to have children?
no, I didn't. And
Mm,
actually for a long time, I didn't want to have children. I think I probably did have some instinctual wanting, but as a young adult processing my own familial trauma, and we're not talking any huge neglect or violence or anything, just that small t trauma that you grow up in a family where there's mismatches and you come to be wounded from that.
mm,
So for a long time, I didn't want to have children because I didn't want to do that to my children. And then I also had a thread of kind of running around, why would I have a child? Like what is the purpose? If the only purpose is to serve me, then I shouldn't do that. It needs to be for some greater reason. It can't just be because I don't want to grow old by myself. So there was quite a deep, I guess, years of journeying. And there was also a thread of the kind of feminist, I'm not up for doing this unless you, my beautiful partner, Matt, are willing to be our co-leader in this. Like I'm not going to get stuck being the carer at home without a mutual kind of parenting thing. So it took a long time actually
mm.
to be ready to get to a place of all of those things being aligned.
Yeah, and I think making that decision also takes some maturity. And when we're young, we might not necessarily have the wherewithal or the ability to consider all the different levels of reasoning or outcomes of saying I want to have a child and then going and doing it. So you know you get to a certain age and you kind of like start to realize, well, it's bigger than what I thought it was, or it has more meaning than what I thought it did, things like that. Because I know from myself, when I was young, there was a lot of assumptions made about me being a girl, getting married, having children. It was a path that was already laid out that if I wanted to, I could just walk that path.
Mm.
But I went to a nun school. I went to a convent school, but it was a very progressive school. And they taught us girls that we could choose We could have it, do anything that we wanted to do. We didn't have to walk the path that was laid out for us if we didn't want to. And a lot of the girls in my year ended up being entrepreneurs and having their own businesses and things like that. I didn't want that road because my parents had their own business, and I was like, I never want to work that hard. So I chose differently for myself. But a lot of my girlfriends are that now. They're coaches, and they're, like they're spiritually awake, and they're, flourishing and all of that. So a rich array of um, paths were born from my year at school. And so I started to question, do I want children? Do I want to get married? Do I want all of those things? And when I met my husband, at that point in my life, I had kind of like grown out of the idea of having children. And so it wasn't really high on my priority
Mm,
list.
mm.
And he was okay with that. He was fine with that. And then when we got married and we started our life together, the conversation started to come up from not just from his side, from both of us. And we
Mm.
started to contemplate what it would be like. What would life be like with a child? And, is that something that we want to be responsible for? Bloody, bloody, blah. And it happened with Juliet. And the timing wasn't great because I'd just been promoted at work and, that sort of thing. But we were so happy about it. It was like we didn't care.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that journey was a very up and down one because it wasn't straightforward. I didn't just go, yes, I'll have children. And I always thought I was going to have children, similar
Mm.
to you. And then we tried to get pregnant again with our second child, and it wasn't happening. And we didn't understand why. We didn't know what was happening because we'd gotten pregnant with Juliet. And so we started to do some discovering, and there was no explanation. It was called unexplained infertility.
Don't you love the way the medical profession finds, like, they make up terms
Yeah.
and I mean, sometimes they're really useful, hey, but it is a bit of that, like,
Like generalized anxiety.
yeah,
Like,
it's like, what about we just talk about how being the complexity of humanness and yeah, I mean, it's at the same time crazily simple, and we are biologically designed as species to generate new species to keep our species going. So that's it's so simple at that level, but at another level, it is so deeply complex. Like, it's not something
mm,
scientifically able to just. And if you think about the broader realm of souls, and then that's just another whole layer again, right?
yeah.
So yes,
Yes.
sorry to interject, but I just, like,
No.
and just all and around birth and fertility, there's so much of this. Like, now calling women over 40 have geriatric pregnancies. It's
I hate
like,
that term.
what?
I hate that term.
It's
I
so
don't even know if it's over 40. I think it's younger than that now. Like it's it
anyway, back to you and the
mm,
unexplained infertility.
yeah. So a friend of mine was having a similar problem. She wasn't getting pregnant, and they had decided to do the IVF route. And she said, "Why have you thought about doing IVF?" And it had been over a year of trying to get pregnant. And in the scheme of things now, when I look back, that's not a lot. It's not a lot of time.
But it feels like so much at that.
Mm. And I was thinking, we got pregnant with Juliet so quickly, and the other thing was I had never been on the pill. either. I started taking it when I was 18, but I didn't like what it was doing to my hormones and my body, and in turn my mood swings and things like that. I just didn't like the feeling of it. So I stopped taking it pretty quickly. So there was no clear indication as to why I wasn't getting pregnant. And so, I now think back and I think it was stress, and
Mm.
it was, probably a lot of just my body saying, you can't handle it right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, we thought, let's just look into IVF.
Mm.
And we found a really good doctor. Actually, he's still a friend of ours, the doctor that we
Mm.
used.
Bless.
And we decided financially it was possible to do. And so we decided we'd go down the IVF route. And it was very stressful, and it was extremely invasive, and it really tested our resolve for a baby. It really tested us. And we ended up getting pregnant on IVF. I think it was the second round of IVF we got pregnant. And I was, I think I was 3, 4 months in when they discovered a problem. And they said, okay, let's do an amniocentesis just to
Yeah.
find out where, like, because it was the list of things that it could have been was like 200 things long.
Mm.
And they said, we want to know what we're facing here. So let's do it. And we talked about it. Spencer and I talked about it at length, and we thought, okay, we will do that so that we've got an idea.
Can you
Um,
just let's just make sure that people listening, watching know what that is, like amniocentesis,
yeah, right.
just to make sure that, because you and I, I'm just catching the you and I know stuff
Yeah.
now that we didn't know and other people didn't know, and
Yeah,
why
good
that was
point.
a big decision.
An amniocentesis is a test where they put a needle into the abdomen and into the amniotic sac of the baby and draw out some amniotic fluid. Um, and it's very quick. It's not painless, but it wasn't unbearable. But the needle is massive because it has to go through the skin and then through all the layers into the uterus and then into the amniotic sac to draw out the amniotic fluid. And then they test the fluid to find the markers that they need of what it could possibly be, because there was lots of issues. There was Down syndrome. There was like, you know, and the issue that I had was it was called low PAPA, which is a hormone. I
Ah.
had low levels of PAPA, which was what they were testing for. And so I remember being in the doctor's surgery, and we were talking about the risks involved of doing this test. And she was telling me what they were. And I remember making a flippant comment towards the end of that conversation, because she said to me, I've never had a problem with this. I've never had anybody have issues. That's how safe this is. That she was trying to reassure me
Mm. Mm.
that it was safe. And she was talking about her track record being spotless. She'd never had anybody come back with an issue. As in not so much that the test was negative, but that the risks involved in having the the test. She's never had anybody lose a child or miscarried. or anything
Because
like that.
you can, so when you're doing what they call, they're called invasive, are they? No, they're,
Yes,
so they are actually coming into the space where the baby's growing. So there is a risk
yes,
that that will trigger, complications with all the beautiful parts that form a pregnancy.
that's right.
So
That's
you
exactly
made
right.
a comment.
So yeah, she was trying to, appease my mind, and I threw this comment out there that there's always the first time. There's always a first time for everything, or something I said. Not really thinking about what I'd said, because it was more like a feeling than, it was like, well, you sound so confident, like you really can't be that confident because there's always a first time, sort of thing. That was where I was coming from. And so we did it, everything went well. I went home and there was a 2-week period. They give you like 12 to 14 days. If anything happens within that time, they attribute it to the test.
Right.
9 days later, after I had the test, my water broke and the amniotic fluid released from the baby. And I went to the hospital. It's called premature rupture of membrane.
Yeah.
So for short, they call it PROM. And they explained to me what had happened. They attributed it to the test because it was within the 14-day
Yeah.
period. It was 9 days. And they sent me home and they said, you've got choices now. These are your choices. You can abort the pregnancy. You can stay on bed rest and hydrate as much as possible to try and heal the tear in the amniotic sac and it fill up again. And the baby may be born fine, which it is possible.
Yeah.
And I'll go into that later. Um, So I decided I'm giving this baby a chance. I'm going home. I'm going to be on bed rest. I'm going to rehydrate. I'm not going the only time I got off the couch was to go to the bathroom. That was the only time I would get up.
And at this point, how old was Juliet?
She was 4.5, I think.
Yeah, just wanting to
4.
put that in context. And
Actually, no, she was younger than that. I think she may have even been 3.
I've got my windows open. Are you hearing lots of background noise, or is
No.
just let me know if it's you're hearing disturbance, because I've got the windows open and the squirrely weather's arriving.
Yeah, right.
So just wanted to put that in context, that you had a toddler, a preschooler, and
Yes.
you were on bed rest. What a huge.
Yes, exactly. So, I think, yeah, actually, it's a good question. I think she was almost 4 at the time, or just turned 4. Anyway, so um, lots happened within that time period that I was on bed rest in my family and stuff. Like it brought out a lot of truth in my family. And I started to see things that I didn't like. And it was shocking to me because I was going through this really tough thing.
Mm,
Um, and there was not a lot of understanding coming from my siblings and my parents and that. So, which was an eye opener because this was the first time really in my life that I'd ever encountered something that was considered hard, like
yeah.
really hard. And, when you go through something like that, you look for a support system. You look for people around you who are going to help lift you up and
Mhm.
help you with things. And that didn't happen. So eventually, um, the baby, what could this trigger warning to people, because this is hard. this stuff that's happened from here on in.
Yeah, and I'm just
Um,
thinking too, we should well, after the live is finished, put a content
yeah,
thing on about that we're discussing pregnancy and birth
yeah,
and loss, pregnancy loss, just for people who are tender in it.
yeah,
And
of course.
that the people who are connecting with us are open and ready to hear, because putting a um, putting a veil over things that can happen to any woman and any
Mm,
family, I think there's well intention there, and we do need to be tender and protective of others.
of course.
But that veil has, for for both you and I, been pretty unhelpful for our
Mm,
experiences, because it meant that we didn't know things that would have helped us journey better with it, and
exactly.
and others in the community around us may have, if everyone was a bit more aware, like, yeah. So thank you for pausing, and let's
Mm,
just, we're tenderly holding each other and our and the other folks who might journey with us in this at some point, either now or later.
yeah, yeah. This is the point where we're discussing the real stuff
Yeah,
without the veil,
yeah.
which is so totally necessary, really. I'm not going to be talking about like blood and guts and stuff like that. I'm just talking about things that deeply affected me,
Hmm.
which could then deeply affect anybody watching this.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, what happened then? I was doing my best on bed rest to stay still and hydrate and give the baby nutrition. And I went into chat groups online with women who had been through the same thing. And prom can happen for lots of different reasons. It doesn't just happen from an amniocentesis. So there were women in there who'd had trauma, it had happened naturally because they had a weak amniotic sac. There was people who'd had amniocentesis. There were all sorts of reasons. And we were all talking and really supporting each other, talking about tips, talking about our experiences. And I was searching for that support because I wasn't getting it from my family,
Mm.
which is why I found these online support groups. And it was amazing for me. It was so amazing to talk to other women who were going through the same thing in real time that I was going through all over the world. And so I was following these directions from some of the women that they'd found helpful. There were women who um, had prom and had their healthy child, and the child survived, and they were on the other side of it. There were women who had prom who had lost their babies. There were women who were in the middle of going through the prom, like me. So there were women at all different stages of the issue talking and supporting each other. And so, I had hope. And I didn't know if what I was doing was going to work for me. I had no clue. So the way I had to deal with the situation was just a day at a time and try and make the best decision I could on that day with the information that I had.
Wow.
That's all I could do because I was in no man's land. I didn't know every case was so unique and so different that you couldn't predict what was happening. And so I was just determined. I just had my determined head on. And I thought to myself, okay, if Spencer and I are good with the way we're moving forward, that's all that matters. Nobody else needs to understand the trajectory or the path that we've chosen because we're the ones who are making the decisions. And if they can't understand it, right now, I can't worry about that. That's something that I can talk to them about later and try and help them understand. But right now, I can't do that. And so It comes to a head where one day I get up to go to the bathroom and I feel something there, and it's the cord. So the cord prolapsed, which meant that the amniotic sac wasn't healing the way I wanted it to, and it had actually torn more. So I knew that that was the beginning of the end. So I went to the hospital, and they couldn't do anything for me. They were just basically counseling me and helping me through the process. Because once that happened, there was nothing that could be done because the sac was not going to repair itself now.
Mm.
And so that journey through that whole experience to the point where I was now having to accept that what all my efforts that I had put in up until that point weren't working. Um, it was like, this is it. Like I just had to deal with it, and I had to accept it. Like, I had to come to terms with it, put it that way. I didn't have to accept it in that moment, but I had to come to terms with it.
Mm.
And again, my situation with my family worsened through that experience, which was another level of shock for me with the way things happened. Like it was I was dealing with what was happening to me, and then I had to deal with the family not approving of things, and you know and making a noise about things, and it was like, I can't deal with this in this real time moment. I have to deal with this over here.
Mm.
And I had to build a wall of sorts over here so that I could have the emotional capacity to do with what I needed to do for my situation with my baby. And that was unexpected for me. So this whole thing was a learning curve, really, about myself, about my family, about, how we deal with hard stuff, how we dealt with tragedy, because that was the first real tragedy that had happened in my family that was public. Like, my sister had been through things, but she hadn't told anyone.
Yeah.
And my brother had been through things, but he hadn't told anybody, the things like that. So this was like the whole family knew what was happening. For the first time, it was everybody going through it together.
Mm.
And yeah, so that was really hard. And then to have Juliet, like, because by that time she was actually, yeah, she was 5 then, because not long after that she turned 5. So she was 4 when all of this was going on.
Okay.
And we talk about it now, her and she doesn't remember. And I think we talked about this on our live too. She
Yeah,
said,
with the
I
girl.
don't really, I don't really remember the sorrow. She remembers it being like a thing in our family, and it was big, but she doesn't remember me being so sad all the time.
Yeah.
And that shocked me because Spence and I, we were devastated,
Mm.
and we cried a lot. And I was on bed rest for months. I think the baby, his name was Aaron, by the way. I think
Oh, Aaron.
yeah, he was just shy of 6 months when he passed.
Yeah.
So I was on bed rest for a long time. That whole experience was
Yeah.
months.
Whew.
Yeah. So and the fact that she's like, Mum, I don't really remember. I was like, like, wow, that's huge. That I remember everything, and I remember it being so full of sadness and drama and everything, but it didn't translate down to her.
Yeah.
which was pretty incredible. And then we had we were grieving for about 6 months. And then we went back on IVF
Wow.
after that. And that, after that experience, going back on IVF was really hard.
Absolutely.
It was really, really hard. And there was fear, there was trauma, there was, every step that I was taking from then on was like cement shoes.
Mm,
And everything was so considered, everything was so hard to decide because of what we'd been through. And when I finally did get pregnant with Bryn, I like, the pregnancy was like, and especially when I got to that 6 month mark,
mm.
like those milestones of being in each of those stages of pregnancy was really hard. And then I got through those, I got through them despite the fear, despite myself, despite, all the drama and everything and being worried about everything. I got through them. And then when I had Bryn in my arms, it's like I remember his birth so well. I had him in my arms. I was like, nobody's taking him from me. Like I was holding on to him, and I was just in love. Like I was holding him in my arms and I was just looking at him for hours. And the nurse came in and she gave me into trouble because I hadn't started breastfeeding him yet. I hadn't given him feed, but he wasn't crying. He wasn't in
No,
distress.
no.
We were just lying there in love with each other the whole time. And she was like, Claudia, you've got to feed him. Like, you got to put him on the boob. And I was like, oh, okay. So um, started the breastfeeding stage, but it was like I had to be prompted. Like,
Mm.
and plus the fact that it had been such a big gap between Juliet and Bryn. There's 7 years between the two of them. It had been a long time, so I was out of practice. But yeah, I'll never forget that, how I felt like I was floating,
Yeah.
and I was so lucky to have this baby that I had wanted for so long and so much, that I was just, yeah, I was like in a trance, almost like a bubble of love with him.
Yeah, well, that's what oxytocin does, doesn't it? When and hormones, like when you are allowed to connect and birth in a way that is uses all of the natural resources, even when you,
Mm.
yeah, like if you can do that, then you do experience a deep, yeah,
Yeah, it was
connection.
so lovely because the two births, Juliet and Bryn, were so different. She was, I wanted to, like, if almost every woman that I've spoken to talks about having a natural birth for their first one. And, I want to do it naturally. I don't want to have drugs, all of that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And she was stuck in the birth canal. So she was actually an emergency C-section
yeah,
because she got stuck in there. Um, and so with Bryn, it was a planned C-section because the doctor came to me after I'd given birth to her, and she said, Mrs. Lasker Jones, your baby's head is quite large. Talking about Juliet. And he said, and 9 times out of 10, subsequent children will have an even larger head. He said, statistically speaking. So I suggest that you have a planned C-section next time.
yeah,
Not because he didn't think I could do it or
yeah,
because,
yeah,
you know, but it was like the reason she's stuck in there is because her head won't fit down through the birth
yeah,
canal.
yeah.
So yeah, give your next one a chance to not get stuck. So that's why I planned a C-section with Bryn. And plus of everything that had happened previously
Mm.
to my pregnancy with him, I didn't want to take the chance.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so great to hear that you were supported in having the C-section to get that oxytocin bubble
Mm,
because there's so much, like you say, everyone wants a natural birth and no intervention and da da da. And no, actually, there's increasing numbers of women who who want to elect for an elective cesarean section because I think there is a lot of fear about birth. We're
yeah,
further disconnected from our bodies and physiological birth. But there's so much judgment around women's choices and birthing right. So it's
yes,
and I think holding on to what is sacred is that it, regardless of what happens and how you birth, it is a sacred rite of passage,
mm,
birthing into motherhood. So yeah, to get the resources around you to be supported in that sacred rite of passage, I think is the critical thing, not what bit of this or that other thing procedure you do or don't want. I mean, great when you've got clarity for what you do and don't want, but you're living proof there of actually just holding the intention of the kind of connection and relationship you wanted with your baby.
yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because I remember the memory of his birth is him laying in my elbow, in the crook of my elbow, lying then against my skin after having him. That memory is so strong
Yeah.
for me. And the feeling of him in my arms rather than in my womb,
Yes.
like feeling him from the inside. And now I'm feeling him from the outside. It was like incredible. And the fact that he was actually real. That
Yeah.
was the other thing. It was like he's real. He exists. Like he's not just a figment of my imagination in my womb. He's actually real. He's here. That was the other thing. And I was having to kind of pinch myself almost. And the happiness was so strong. The joy and the happiness of coming from this experience of complete, in my life up until that point, complete horror
Yeah.
to now holding my baby and him being real and him being healthy and alive was like the best thing ever. Yeah, it was amazing.
And feeling
And
that.
yeah, and so it was like all the pain, all the drama, all the stuff that had happened before that had been washed away in this moment, and that was all that mattered to me.
Yeah, there's profoundness in that presence, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just talking about what you just mentioned then about women in having that journey and having like the being able to choose the happiness and choose how they were, how they wanted to experience childbirth. You just reminded me of a friend of mine. We went through pregnancy together when I was pregnant with Aaron. She was pregnant with her son at the same time.
Mm.
And we were talking quite a bit because she'd had already had a baby also, and she'd had a C-section, an emergency C-section with that child, the same as me with Juliet. But with this pregnancy, she wanted to have her baby naturally. And just by coincidence, she and I were seeing the same OB.
Yeah, right.
Um, and she wanted to have a natural birth. Sorry, got a frog in my throat. So, and he wasn't supporting her in that decision. He wasn't supportive of her having a natural birth after having an
Yeah.
emergency C-section. And so we talked at length about that. And she's like, I think I'm going to swap OBs. I think I need to find somebody who can support me in my decision, because it's really important to me that I have this child naturally, because I know it's possible.
Mm.
And so she did. And I was like, you go, girl, like you do that. Like, it wasn't for me. It wasn't the decision I wanted to make for myself, but it was the decision she wanted. And so she went and found another obstetrician, and she had her baby naturally.
Bless.
Yeah, which was amazing. And that to me was like, wow, what's possible if you believe in yourself. If you, like me, having a C-section and then being able to hold my baby and still have that oxytocin and still have that bubble of love and still have all of those things come and be part of my experience, because I wanted it to be, because I chose it to be, because I loved my son so much after everything that I've been through. I was so grateful for having that moment. And she advocated for herself also and got the outcome that she wanted. So I think there's a strong, in those experiences, there's a strong theme of believing in, that you can have the things that you want, even in the face of somebody who's supposed to know more than you, or is a professional doctor or learned person or whatever, with
Mm.
degrees upon degrees upon degrees, even when they're telling you it's not a good idea or it's not possible. I think believing in yourself and advocating for the things that you want in your life when it comes to pregnancy and birth and things like that, there's just two strong examples of how it's possible.
Well, and it's that thing of, you know, um, asking more or choosing to find out more. And I mean, I guess I get fired up about the birthing space because I mean, I've had four pregnancies, very different pregnancies, and three very different births. And when we take away women's power as birth and givers, like birth keepers, then
Mm.
really disempower women from and society from some of the not finding the right words, from some of the power that we hold, that isn't controllable by mechanics and machines and logical system. It there's so much birth
Yeah.
trauma out there. So that's what I get fired up about, because we're told a message often that you don't know and you can't do it and it's
Yeah.
risky. And yeah, with my very last pregnancy and birth with Seamus, and finding this amazing private midwife who she's now retired. So lucky to have got her in her final years of her amazing profession. But her thing was, you have everything you need to birth this
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
You have everything you need. And that was just the antidote to the, oh, you might not have, and having, I mean, well, yeah, having already experienced loss, that
Mm.
paradox of you have everything you need and you might not have the baby that you want or you're expecting. It might not go how you want. You
Yes.
have everything you need, like holding those things in tension, in contrast, amidst all the other swirl of things, I think is the power and the magic, right? Like that does
Yeah.
work to us on being human. Because, birth and death are kind of the ultimate kind of experiences of embodied
Mm.
humanness of ourselves.
Yeah, because it's the beginning and the end of the journey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess in the middle stage of life, there's a sense of existence of things other than living. I don't know. Like it just feels like those are the times at which it's most illuminating
Oh, 100%. I agree with
what
you.
it is to be human in this earthly body, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was speaking from my experience, I was I had so much fear around my body birthing a baby. I had a lot of fear around that process because of the pain,
Yeah.
because of the pain I knew I was going to experience. And the funny thing about that, not funny, haha, as in it was kind of ironic,
Yeah.
funny, that was the least scariest part.
Right.
The one thing I was the most worried about was the least scariest of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much, I think so much emphasis and focus is put on, you know, pain relief and how a woman handles it and all of that and how what the experience is going to be like, that that really the focus is, because it's the hype. It's like everybody talks about it and
Yeah.
everybody, like, women know that it's going to be painful, and it's, I mean, it's in the Bible, that Eve was, condemned to having that pain. Like, it's a story that we're all told right from a very young age.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I probably, the second time around, was that was it wasn't even a consideration. It didn't bother me whatsoever. I knew that there was possibly going to be pain involved, but my experience was that I had a planned cesarean, so I didn't go into labor
Yeah.
before. But some women do. They go into labor and then they have the cesarean.
Yeah.
So, that pain is part of the story,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it should be like, in my experience now, after the fact, it's only a very small part of the story. Whereas before I had the baby, it was such a huge part of the story for me.
Well, and the story that pain equals bad
Mm,
and pleasure equals good, right?
yeah.
Is a big part of the frame. Whereas, and did I spoke about this on the last episode when Anya and Julia and you and I talked about kind of my experience with Harry and being, given that window into actually pain is a pathway to experiencing life and truth, you know. So when we have pain is a bad thing to be fearful of, um, then we can't tune into our natural rhythms and ways of being. Like,
Yeah.
um, I'm going to shut the windows in a sec because I'm very distracted by the swirling weather, but I'm also really, that noticing messages from life, because as we're talking, it was very still and calm this morning, kind of balmy, which is unusual for Melbourne. But
Calm
yeah,
before the storm.
yeah, well, that's right. As we've been talking, it's really whipped up and it's like quite wild. And there's a wildness. And as you're speaking, I'm like feeling
Wow.
that wildness of what it is to be in life as a mama and birthing. And
Yeah, nobody tells you about that feeling of the swirling and life happening, and you're, because childbirth is the same. Your body is doing things that you didn't know, particularly when it's your first birth and first pregnancy. Your body is doing things you didn't know it could do.
Well, and I
And the
don't know.
swirling feeling.
I'm sitting with now, like, because I'm like, I maybe I just forgot. Maybe I could only take in as much as I could take in with Anya's birth, my first. Um, but I don't think like it feels like only with Seamus's birth, my beautiful last experience of birthing, did I really get told it's a journey with you and your baby. It
Yes.
isn't you suddenly going, okay, babes, you're out of here. What that, and then you have these contractions, and it's like a dance with you and the baby, and
Yeah.
they are signaling to your body, I'm ready now, and your body is responding to them so that, like in a physiological natural birth.
Yeah.
And no, it's like that is incredible that I
Yeah.
that it
100%.
isn't, it's not just some random you know like a period pain. Like that was what we were all told. Hey, it's just like a really bad period cramp. It's like
That hasn't, like, that explanation doesn't even, it's not even like a pinhead of
the
what the
experience.
experience. No.
And it's actually really unhelpful because in a really bad, yeah, because it doesn't actually describe what the dance of birthing is from
Mm.
a physical point of view, from a, psychological, emotional, spiritual point of view. It's
Yeah.
really unhelpful.
Yeah. So you talking about the swirling of the sky and how it was calm and now you're distracted because this weather is coming up is such a beautiful anecdote. It's like a metaphor for what we're talking about because that is the feeling of birth
Yeah.
that we're describing here. It's very similar where you have an idea, like you think you have an idea of what the storm is going to feel like or look like. And I'm talking about the pregnancy and the birth here. Um, because you've spoken to other women or you've read, accounts of other women having babies, but it's really personal to you.
Mhm.
You can have an idea of it, but until you've had your own experience, it's like a fingerprint. It's your experience. It's your dance with your baby. It's
Mm.
your storm, and it doesn't look like anybody else's.
Each one is so unique too, hey. And
Yeah.
one of the teachers that I haven't worked, well, no, I've worked bits with, beautiful, incredible Jane Hardwick Collins, who runs the School of Shamanic Womancraft. She always talks about, her thing is you have the birth you need to have,
Yeah.
learn what you need to learn, which is very deep and very confronting when you're someone who has journeyed with birth as not joy, as struggle.
Yes.
Yeah.
As struggle. Exactly.
And
But I
yeah,
think,
I would love to share, maybe I should just do like the super brief kind of
yes,
my
please. I would
birth.
love that.
But I'm going to shut the windows because
Yeah,
obviously
go
the
for it.
swirling is exciting, and I'm A, concerned about sound quality, and B, it's just, I do want to cozy in a bit. So give
Yeah.
me a sec. I'm just going to dampen down the noise a tiny bit. All right. Oh, before I do that, I do just want to express deep gratitude to you
Oh,
for your sharing your authenticity and your vulnerability. And
oh, thanks, Fiona. That's lovely.
yeah,
I think it's so like these sorts of conversations really it like energize me.
Mm.
It is painful thinking about what happened, and it brings up a lot of that painful feelings and the memories. But I really want to extract the lessons and the power out of those things. And so talking to you about it and broadcasting it live so other people can hear it really helps me, one, to process again from this level that I am now, because I'm a different person to
Yeah.
what I was then. And also it helps me to find purpose in the pain,
Mm. Mm.
and not have it just be a bad memory, if
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably my greatest grief with women who experience grief and loss, or negative birthing experiences, trauma, is the suppression of it.
Yeah.
Because when we suppress it, we carry it as a wound that is not being healed, a
Yeah.
scar that is open, kind of an open wound. Whereas
Yeah.
when we can journey with it and keep revisiting, like you say, that's quite a few years now, and the tenderness is still there,
Mm.
and the healing continues. It's part of
Yeah.
the fabric. It's part of the fabric of your life and your story and your
Yeah. I
that
need to plug, sorry, I need to plug my computer in. Its battery's low.
we've
I
both
won't
got
be
a
a second.
bit of admin.
Yes. Between your windows and my battery, we'll get there in the end. Okay. There we go. Done.
All right.
There
Yes.
we go. Done.
Let me be just want to make sure that I share in a kind of, I'll just start. So yeah, like you describe with Anya, who is 19, I was very like, when we were finally like, yes, want to have children. And it was very weird timing because I had got chronic fatigue and had been very, very unwell. And so then it was like, and then I have to have children, had come. And it's like, I can't have a child, and so got all the advice and support I needed, and had been on the pill, and then came off. Next month we're pregnant with Anya, just
Wow.
that, like, it was just so fast. And it's like, what? And I mean, I don't remember a huge amount about her pregnancy, really. And except that I was very clear I wanted to work in a with a birth center. I want a natural birth, all those things.
Yeah.
Little did I know, what you really need to be cocooned and have your space held for you to be able to
Yes.
birth
So
naturally,
important.
physiologically. Because, and like so many animals, they withdraw, they find their cozy nest when they're birthing.
Mm.
Humans need that too. So, and we caught the worst of the worst in terms of, we were part of our local hospital's birth centre program, but it was going through massive change at the time. And so never saw the same midwife twice, blah, blah, blah. They moved from the lovely smaller branch of the hospital during my pregnancy, where women had been going to birth, where they had a little lounge and stuff, to the big major hospital. And the birth centre was just rooms off to the side. But no, it was okay. They still had a birth pool, blah, blah, blah. So her birth, she was past 40 weeks. Having a set due date was really problem. Like, now that I know, I'm like, why do we talk about they're due on this particular day? Because
Yeah.
that's not how it works anyway.
Yeah.
So I was very impatient for her to come in the end. And I had spent my years being very, like, needing to control things to feel safe and secure.
Yes.
So,
I know that feeling.
yeah, so going into the birthing process and the motherhood process, and I mean, I had been working crazy hard as a teacher, and I didn't know any, and I was always kind of like, I don't know how to do life without work in it.
Yep.
So that was probably the biggest thing for me, that shift in identity from a competent working person into a mother who had to make life work around me. So
Mm-hmm.
Anya's birth was very long and it was very intense, and I was not very well, and I was quite anxious, and I wasn't very well supported. Even though I had Matt and I had a beautiful friend, but she had never birthed either. So now, no, again, I'm like, you need the elders, the female elder there with you, right?
Yes.
So, and the whole trauma around having to go figure out when to go, like being told, well, if you come in too early and you're not advanced enough, we'll send you back home.
Yeah.
Like, really
Yes.
about it all.
You're
Um,
bringing back all those memories for me too, because it
so
was the
yeah,
same.
so getting to hospital and then being so, and my labor really slowed down, and they're like, you're not that far advanced. It's like, well, duh, because when you take someone out of a safe space and put them suddenly into this place where they don't know whether safety is, and comfort and privacy, then birth does slow down.
Yeah.
And through my whole actual birthing process with Anya, I didn't get any of skilled birth center midwives who weren't skilled in natural birth. It was just
Right.
because they were in such a space of transition. So that was really tough, because I was at some point, I'm like, and water was so great in the shower. Then I wanted to get in the birthing pool.
Yeah.
Again, the birthing pool was just like a big bath. It's like when I birthed Seamus at home in the birthing pool, it was like a proper
Yeah.
pool with
A
a little
decent amount.
seat thing, and you could lean and move around, and it's soft edges, and a hard bathtub is no good for trying to birth in. But because I didn't have a skillful natural birth midwife with me, they didn't help the birth to move along. So in the end, I'd been laboring for nearly 24 hours, and they just really were like, you know, you're not progressing. You're getting exhausted, which was true. We really think we should induce you, blah, blah. So at that point, I kind of gave over to that process,
Yeah.
which, I mean, part of me is like, that's what I needed to do to have a birth, to get her out without me being completely depleted. But now, yeah, there's that little bit of grief that I didn't get the support, and so I ended up,
Yeah.
with drugs and people saying, push now, and all of that stuff. But she came into the world. We had that beautiful bonding. Um, and probably what's most important, I guess, about becoming mother with her was I really just had no clue. So the breastfeeding was so hard, and because I had had a history of being unwell and with the chronic fatigue, I was still needed lots of rest. So the whole sleep deprivation thing was really hard. Um, I had had some depression and anxiety with the chronic fatigue, so I was on alert for that. And basically, at 7 weeks old, I hit really acute postnatal depression with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, again, another thing that people don't or didn't 20 years ago talk about. Um, but it was a really, really tough time for me with Anya. It's not, some women experience real disconnection from their babies with
Yes.
the postnatal depression. I didn't experience that. I just was in a blackness that life just didn't seem possible.
Yeah.
and looking after this baby just didn't seem possible. So, yeah, somehow we got through, I guess. And we had a beautiful community around us, which was what kept me going. But
Mm.
that experience of postnatal depression really made me, I wasn't in a hurry to go back for number two.
Yeah.
So how long was it then? 12, 5 or 6 years later, through a whole storm of other things that had happened, we decided that yes, we really did want to have another child and we were ready. And same thing happened with Harry, got pregnant super fast,
Wow.
super fast. My pregnancy with Harry was super, super difficult. I had a lot of pain, a lot of illness, a lot of fatigue. Um, but I was really clear on wanting this babe. And just working with my doctor, we figured out that I would need to finish work earlier because my body was really doing it tough. Um, and we did, so with Anya and Harry, we didn't do any kind of early screening or anything to check on the well-being of the baby. We were kind of like, well, if we have a baby with Down syndrome or something, that's, what life is giving us.
Mm-hmm.
So we just did 20-week ultrasound, saw Harry, he looked so perfectly beautiful. We, heartbeat, everything. We just moseyed along. And I mean, it's that thing you said at the start of people, stuff that happened to me, I just had no idea that it can happen. So,
Yeah.
like just the kind of content warning we lost Harry to a stillbirth. Um, and his little life has been the most only ever lived in my womb has been the most profound thing for my life. So
Yeah.
seeing in that pain and in that loss and grief and darkness, that the profoundness of how life is has really transformed me. And um, the paradox here, and it was a really big paradox until I was able to kind of complete the cycle with birthing Seamus. But Harry's birth was absolutely beautiful, even though he had died in my womb. And I had come to that point. It's that body wisdom thing, isn't it? Because I had had a sense that, like, I'd had very bad pain. I'd had a sense that maybe something wasn't right. But you keep telling yourself, no, it's okay. Don't, like, so when I eventually did kind of go, I haven't been feeling movement. I think it was probably about a week after Harry probably passed in my womb. Um, and when we found out from the scan in the hospital, and then I guess I went straight into who do I need to have around me to protect me, and
Exactly.
also having, I mean, I had the gift of people who just came, like I had engaged not many weeks before with an incredible independent midwife because I'd started questioning the whole screwed up hospital system and how I couldn't get the kind of birth support I needed. So she was there to support me. But yeah, and I really hear how it was different for you with your family not really being there and understanding. And
Yeah.
I think I unconsciously probably put a barrier in place. Like I think I already knew that the people who couldn't hold me in the deep journey. and to have the midwife and an amazing friend who had a grief counselling history. I didn't know, like, she wasn't a grief
Right.
counselor at that point, but to have them by my side and to have the midwife say to me, you're in grief now, like you're
Yeah.
in the pain, to you decide whether you want to die, because they're going to try, and when you go into hospital to birth him, they're going to try and give you lots of pain relief, and they're going to try and shut everything down, keep you from all that other birthing, because it's a freaking women's hospital, so there's women birthing and babies everywhere. But it's like you can shut down all of that and just get on with the doing of the birthing, or you can see it all as part of the process. And I'm so glad that, I mean, in some ways I can look back now and go, that's pretty courageous to open yourself up to it.
Yeah.
But the fact that I did meant that I've drunk from that deep well of experience of life and death. And I did it on my terms and in my way. And I was really good at pushing out the people who, like the staff at the hospital, the midwives, doctors who just, I mean, it was their stuff that meant that, oh, I did this the other day too.
You raised your
Oh,
hand. How
it's just,
funny.
there we go. It's raising its hand by itself. I don't know how to do, like, go
I
away.
think that's the AI of the platform.
Oh, because it saw me go like that. Oh,
Yeah.
there we go. I'm kind of, oh, that's spooky. I didn't know now, but at least now I know, Claudia, that because the other day when it happened, I was like, oh, have I got something on my keyboard that's,
No, I think it's shut like it on didn't do that.
it's
I
picking.
think it's a feature of Zoom.
Wow. Okay. So
So
that,
like, because when you're in a meeting and someone puts their hand
yeah,
up, they want to speak. Yeah.
huh, there you go. So I'm
Yeah.
raising my hands up to holding it all. Again, messages from life. I
Yes.
wanted to be, I was willing to put my hand up. I didn't want to hide. I
I
didn't.
think that's amazing. I
And
think that you like just listening to you speak about the deep personal connection and experience from your journey with your son and feeling into my journey with my son. I really see the contrast in how all the drama that was going on in the periphery had pulled me out. It had really pulled me out of it. And that deep well that you're talking about didn't come straight away for me.
no, no,
It
no.
did eventually, but to have, I couldn't, I just physically and mentally couldn't experience it the way in the moment, the way I probably maybe would have wanted to.
And could have had you had that sacred space, and that's part of why I'm working into the work that I'm doing now, as a life walker. And, then when I did death walker training years, it's like I could see the power of when there's someone there or someone's there that create that sacred space for you.
Yeah.
You can actually go deep. You can drink from that deep well and you can experience the profound. And, while I was birthing Harry in the hospital, like my midwife had gone away, but I went very internal. And with Anya, I had been very external in my laboring, whereas with Harry, I went very internal. And Matt sat in the corner. Like I can still remember him sitting quietly in the corner of the room, reading and responding if I needed that kind of thing, but just letting me be in my process. and responding to what I needed rather than being like, come on, what,
Mm.
you know. But I had a very profound experience of a kind of trance meditation, like um, I was between uh, uh, contractions and just doing that deep breathing. And what came was this vision of me connected to all the other women, birthing women who had ever birthed in the world. Like I had this, and then all of a sudden it was like an ancient tree of colorful threads of that we were just connected throughout time and space.
Wow.
Feel myself. So even though I knew I was birthing a baby who wasn't going to be alive with us, that profoundness of birthing and women and women's business and womanhood was there. And when he was born, like when he came and he was born in his little sack, I had that same thing that you describe of that deep love, and I held him and we cried, we grieved, and I held him because he was without breath. But I had the oxytocin love bubble. And it was, then for a few years, that paradox of Anya's birth being so difficult and me kind of not having that same sense. And then Harry's, but me having this gorgeous kid who's grown up, who's with me and spunky and um, and to have the profound birth experience with Harry without having the child
Mm.
was kind of like that mystery of what? How does that work?
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
close it out with Seamus, and like I find it, and I find it interesting in you that you were kind of ready to go back for number three quite, so soon. But because I was like, after you've experienced that kind of loss, what kind of insanity would make you
So again,
go again? Once you've experienced that, what would make you want to go again?
yeah.
Yeah, that urge, that human urge is so strong, hey?
Yeah. And there was a level of trust also. There was a level of trust um, that I could do it. That, yeah, it's painful, but this is life. This is this is my time on earth, right? And this is life. This is what we're here for. There was a level of that knowing that I'm here to experience all of it, the good and the bad. And if I'm not going to put myself out there, I mean, I know it's so hard and it was so painful. And going through that pregnancy was like my brain was constantly looking for danger, constantly looking for the danger so that I could mitigate the
Yeah,
danger and be
absolutely.
on top of it, like I was hyper vigilant. But it was like this is why I'm here. I'm here to have these experiences and to live life to the fullest. And we wanted to have another baby. And and I knew if that was the case, if I wanted to have that, I needed to walk that journey.
Path
And I
of it.
mean, now looking back, it's kind of like when I have to do hard things now, I like it's hard to remember that I've already done, like I've done the hardest thing
Yeah.
that I possibly could have ever done. And so if I could do that, like I need to have that trust in myself still. If I can do that, if I can go through that pain, then I can go through anything. Like, well, maybe
Same
not
thought,
anything,
you're
but
right. Yeah.
you know
And
what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, totally. And yet, like in terms of parenting, and this would be another whole conversation, is
Yeah.
then thinking you've done the hardest of the hard thing ever, and then to have to walk the really tough path with your, adolescent kids birthing themselves into the world and having to keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing. It's like, whoa, but it is that profound, like and I comment a bit sometimes on some of the parent groups when women are kind of pathologizing, trying to control birth and not have the worst happen, or how can you avoid, or and I kind of, every now and then, I've because it's also, people don't know what they don't know, and it's just public forums, and but every now and then I've found the right time and space to say, hey, it isn't just about that.
Yeah.
And by speaking in this way, you really are putting, I mean, shame is the word that's coming, it's not quite right, onto those of us who have as if, have experienced birth and pregnancy and birth loss.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that it is the worst thing that can ever happen. And it's also the thing that changes you. So stop with how do I, how do I decide whether the risk of stillbirth is, because that would be the worst. It's like, yep, it is. And yeah,
Yeah.
but and there is some curiosity for me too, hey, in what makes us the kind of people, and I'm sure people who are part of the She's of Love community too, what makes us the people who have to do this work? Like, I feel like, yes, it was really courageous to choose to go deep into the pain and deep into the process and birth in the sacred way that I had decided I was working towards and was unexpectedly having to do before I was ready. But it kind of felt like I didn't have a choice. And I think that's been a theme of my life. Like, it's kind of like, if I could choose to take an easier road, sometimes, man, I would really like to. But it doesn't actually feel like a choice. It just doesn't feel like that I can. There's something about me and my life's purpose that is to go deep. And again, now in hindsight, there is a bit of to me talking about this whole very cognitive process around did I ever want to have kids, and why would I have kids, and da 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 da. Now that I know what I know, I'm like, whoa, perhaps, yeah. Doing some more of the heart and body work might have helped me to heal and progress some of my motherhood stuff earlier. That's the journey I've had to go on. But it's not
Yeah.
a choice, right? We kind of
Mm.
have to do this work because it's what we've been called to do.
And what I see in you, the short time that we've known each other and can't become fast friends, I feel, um, is the depth that you go and you are capable of going, and that you can now see yourself going because you've experienced it,
Mm,
benefits. And I know the enormousness of your experience probably doesn't even scratch the surface of what I'm going to say, but that experience that you've been through has created in you a depth of understanding and empathy for others that we benefit from.
I mean, it's the case with all of us, hey, and I'm just noticing I'm deflecting your warm feedback. So I'll stop that and I'll say thank you. It's, again, when we can open and be present and mindful or heartful enough, then the experiences we have in our life can be the threads that, like
Yeah.
like your experience, I didn't experience IVF, with Seamus. After Harry, we had a similar journey of wanting to be pregnant. It wasn't happening. Explored IVF. At that point, I'm in my 40s, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, and they were saying it's this particular issue, and and we just went, we're not willing to do IVF.
Yeah.
So we just held open the possibility that we may have another child or we may never.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but having journeyed, and I have never journeyed close with a super close friend in IVF. It's always been friends and friends of friends
Yeah.
rather than
Right.
my best friend.
Yeah.
But I know enough to know how the IVF journey is. Like you say, it's so invasive and brutal at so many levels.
Mm.
And you know that,
Yeah.
you've got that lived. I guess you can generalize a little bit once you've done really hard stuff in life, hey, to other areas. Um,
Yes. It
but
overlaps.
yeah,
Definitely. There
but
is some overlap in it. Yes.
I guess as a collective, as a community, if we're willing to, a bit like that thing we were talking about, the veils, or if we're willing to peel back the layers a bit more and be a little bit more vulnerable with each other, and trust that people can hold hard stuff, then I mean, it's like that wisdom tree that I
Yeah.
saw when I was birthing Harry. Our strands do just intertwine and
Mhm.
create this strength.
Yeah. It like just one example of that is there's a guy at work. He and his wife are going through IVF at the moment. And he asks me loads of questions because he's like, his wife, she dives deep into things. So he was telling me how she does her research and she really dives deep, and he doesn't do that.
Yeah,
He's doesn't have that type of personality, so that when something's going on, he's because he's so easygoing, he'll just wing it and he'll just go along with her, and she kind of guides him a little bit. And I said to him, that's fine, but every now and then she's going to need you to step up because there was something that she didn't research, or there's something you can't research. So, you know, this is what she's experiencing, and I can give him that
yeah,
knowledge because I experienced it. And every now and then she's going to need only what you can give her. That's all that's going to satisfy that situation is what you can give her. Nobody else will be able to give her that. No amount of research, no. So you need to be prepared to know that that's a possibility. And when you see that opportunity come, you need to, right, I'm here. What do you need? I'm ready, you know?
well, and that's exactly what had happened with Matt. Like, we'd had some really big relational rupture, and like there'd been a shitstorm kind of for in the period between sort of Anya being, yeah, sort of 5, and yeah, anyway, and Matt had started doing some of his deep work
Yeah, right.
prior to Harry's pregnancy, and it was really that profound difference of someone being like, oh, I've got no idea, but I'll be here, and what do you need,
Yes.
love, and to being a space holder, not that he would ever have said, what do you need, love, but that stereotypical kind of, I'm
Yeah.
I'm the man who, and I mean, he would say that with Anya's, and because he'd been in the army reserves, and kind of pretty physically tough and
Yeah.
sporty and all those things, he would say Anya's birth was the hardest thing he had had to experience up till that point because he felt so powerless.
Yeah.
But then by the time we were birthing Harry, he knew that his power was just to hold the space, to be
Yeah.
present, to protect the space for me, and to hold solid so that I could get out of the.
Yeah.
Same with Seamus, because yeah, that same experience of once you've experienced loss, and I've worked with a beautiful friend this year who's experienced pregnancy loss, late miscarriages a couple of times, and he's still journeying now with, now she's pregnant again, and just that anxiety.
Mm,
So, I can so relate to that anxiety
yeah. And I
and
think that
vigilance.
listening to you speaking right now, what comes to my mind is the juxtaposition between the masculine and the feminine, where the woman is doing all the doing during birth. The woman is doing all the doing. Her body is the one that's giving birth, and the man is being all the being.
Yeah.
And normally it's the other way around. The man is doing all the doing, and the woman is more emotional and being there for him. And, you know, that role reversal is kind of nice to witness.
Well,
Because
and I would say, like, I'll just put in there too that I think that if like that thread, you've just made me think, that thread we were talking about not knowing about birth and then being told, it's like, and the pain and stuff, that
Mhm.
actually we're taught about the doing of birth in
Yeah,
our classes, but we don't get taught the being of birth, of
yeah,
being in sync with our baby, and kind of
yes,
ourselves as a mother, and all this stuff, because we're told the only thing that matters is a healthy baby. And it's like, well,
yeah,
no, actually birthing well is important too, but if we can bring our being into our doing of birthing, and like what you're saying is the masculine that has that real doing energy can bring the being to their doing, then
yes,
doing becomes that sacred space holding, rather than, and they know that they need the wise birth keepers there. They're
yeah,
there in a different role. Then
yes,
it's so different. Hey.
yeah. It's like an opening and a widening and a blossoming of the character of everyone involved.
Mm.
It's this beautiful experience that requires those muscles that maybe don't get flexed very often in other areas. It requires them to be used in this way, in this experience with each other.
Absolutely. And it's
And
actually,
it's,
you just made me, sorry,
yeah.
with Seamus. So my midwife and the secondary midwife and a couple of other birth workers working in a group set up a group, because a lot of the new mamas were going off to the mothers groups in the local council area and being really shamed for, or kind of
Mm,
ostracized for
yes.
birth, or it was kind of that jealousy thing almost that happens to the pretty girl or whatever it is.
Yeah,
They
right.
started a group called the Soul Mama Collective. And it just says it all. Like what you're
Mm.
describing is that, yeah, it is the soul.
Yes, it
Like,
really is.
we're birthing souls into the world. Like they've chosen to come in, and yeah, it's just
Yeah. The female body is the portal that the soul comes through. It comes from the ethereal into the material inside our womb.
so magic, right? And that women, like, Anya was talking recently, like it talks about, like, she experiences very difficult periods and pain and wishes, it's that whole, and I'm like, no, I want you to experience the, power. But I get it. Like it's that, again, it's that, I'm not trying to tell her to just No, it really is lovely. It's like when you have a really hard time with a baby and getting no sleep, and then make the most of it. The time is
Yeah.
like you're not hearing me. Exactly. I did say to her this last cycle, I so hear you. And also, it's pretty amazing that
Mm.
the design of this universe is that women carry in them a cyclical way that is the same cyclical pattern of the whole earth.
Yeah, it's
I'm like,
incredible.
that's pretty special. And I hear that your experiencing of it is really painful right now and really
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
Far out, Claudia.
I know. Do you mind if I check to see if we've got any comments
I know. Well, we've
before we
been
go?
on here for like 600 hours. Hey, like I knew that. I knew once we started talking about motherhood,
Right?
and that's just the beginning of it all, not the being a mum to growing and developing kids.
No. Oh, well, that's something we don't have any comments, so we're not gonna we're not gonna prolong it any longer because we've
Part
been
of
going for an hour and 47 minutes.
part of me, yeah, is like because it's been a very slow, that liltiness part of me wants to take it all and kind of take bits of the magic and even bits of maybe the last episode and put some of those stories that the girls told too together because it just feels
Well, they're actually planning a live with each other,
yeah.
which that's going to be interesting too, because we get the mother talk and they get the pre-mother talk.
Yeah, well, and I wasn't sure kind of where our conversation would go today, so I did have a little chat with Anya last night just to be sure about threads and themes that she was okay with me sharing if stuff came up about her life.
Yeah, right.
Which, we've really been focused on the birthing and babies today, which meant we
Mm,
have to, but that's important to me too, that I don't
of
disclose
course.
about others that they're not comfortable with, like that, like us talking about pulling down cutting through the bullshit and being authentic and vulnerable and open, yes, but not at the cost of
No, it needs to be done with great sensitivity and respect
yeah,
for
yeah.
everyone involved, for the listeners, for our family members, that we've mentioned, people that were involved and remember what happened in their own experience.
And I would say about our families and the trickiness of that with with our extended families, that when I get that frustration or anger or disappointment in them and their ways, it's a really helpful anti and judgy of them not being able to show up in the way I need.
Yeah.
The antidote is the odd, they do the best they know how with what
Mm.
I have at the time. Like I really
Yes.
believe that. And sometimes I get frustrated that my soul's calling is this deeper path where I experience more of the pain, more of the vulnerability of the world. And I see some other family and friends who just,
Yes.
and it's getting on with life. I'm like, how can you not be? But then deep down, I just know this is the path I want to be on, and as
Yeah.
journey towards my mum's end of life, not too far away, it's like, oh, I want to be there for the sacred stuff.
Of course.
And
And I
my
think for
is up for, she's very on the practical, making sure they're this, they're that. And I really value that. But I'm like, I'm not, yeah, I'm there for, and I mean, I'm putting a judgment too, hey, that the practical isn't sacred because that's sacred work too, actually.
yeah. Yeah. And I think we need to have all souls that have their calling in all areas. We need all of them. We need everything. We need the practical. We need the deep stuff. We need the people who move slow. We need the people who move quickly. We need all of that like for the melting pot of our world,
And to
in
be
our
open
world.
to each other's ways, it's when the defenses come in and the suppression comes in that it turns toxic, hey?
Yeah. And my experience in with my family is what it is.
Hmm.
And I've spoken quite a bit about it with therapists and with, trying to heal those wounds and stuff like that, just for myself to be able to walk without so much to carry in
Yeah,
my life.
yeah,
But now that I look back, most of it is the shock I remember feeling that that my expectation was one thing and what I got in reality was another thing. That's that's what's the residue left at the bottom of the pot now that I've boiled it all down is so like I really was shocked
yeah,
by how it all went down. And that wall that I was talking about going up and how I needed to, there was like survival. Like I
yeah.
needed to have that wall there so that I could deal with what was going on. And then years later, trying to break down that wall, it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
And this
there's
is why we're
all
on
about,
this journey, right? This is why
yeah,
threads just keep on
yeah,
weaving and weaving and weaving our mat and the mats of others, and in
yeah.
this realm.
And
And
every single thread that we've weaved has brought us here
absolutely,
and made us who we are today. So, huge gratitude for that. Even
absolutely,
with all the pain, even with all the heartache, even with all the hard experiences, with everything, all the, spice and blandness that I've experienced in my recipe of life.
yeah.
I'm grateful for all of it because it's brought me to who I am today. So,
It is. It's, yeah, you made me think of, like, I entered our conversation this morning with this spark of memory of what probably the most profound book I've read about parenting, and apart from the book of life that we've been talking about today, is called Far from the Tree.
right.
And it's profound because it basically, the idea is that there's that saying that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Mm.
Through the book, he talks about what happens to us as parents when that old, when the identity of our child doesn't match.
Interesting.
Kind of like, so for example, a hearing parent having a deaf child, or a, you know, just just it does the work on us,
Yeah,
because
certainly does.
actually it's easy when they are like us, but actually our work as a parent almost is to let go of a belief that we are the makers of a child in our own image.
Yeah.
Actually, we're not. And
Yes.
they come to teach us about a different way of reality in the world. I'm not explaining the fullness of his
No, I get it completely.
huge, profound work in that book, Far from the Tree.
Mm.
Mm.
I'll be reading it.
Well, it'll take you a long time, lovely. I listened to, I
Really
read
thick.
it by listening, and it wasn't till years later that I found it at my doctor's surgery, and it's like in physical hard copy. And I went, oh, no wonder it's taken me years to read this book. Like, listen, read. So huge. Now I've learned that you can see the number of hours that a book is going to be on
Yeah,
Audible.
right.
Oh, right. This one's going to take me a while. But the book of life is going to take us till our end, right? And
That's right. Oh, what a really rich conversation. Thank you so much for your time
hmm,
and for allowing us to listen into your unique view and experience on this planet so far with motherhood.
Mm.
And if you're open to it, I would love to do another one.
I would love to continue the conversation, like I say, about the what
Mm,
happens with all those threads when you then are with a living, breathing human that grows into
yeah.
its own, you know,
Yeah,
and
because
we're
I feel like
taking
we've
from
only
that
scratched the surface really so far.
totally. You know, you're
Mm,
talking about this idea of a, you know, new podcast. It's like, okay, there we go. Off, we're off. We've got another lifetime's worth of stuff to delve into.
yeah.
But it's so like the reciprocity of our, you know, it's like that together we're better than, you know, the sum of our
Mm,
parts, like just the depth of what you're sharing and drawing, you know, drawing out and we can flow together with is feels really special.
yeah, it does. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Um,
Mm,
and I will be in touch with you for another time to make another time for another one of these.
would be great.
Because we're at an hour and 57 minutes
Yeah.
now.
Anyone who's still managed to go all the way through is going to be like,
Oh
wow.
yeah, high fives to you guys. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time and yeah, thanks to everyone who's watching and we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.
See ya. Now, how do I do this?